please now launch your Eclipse, and then we're going to create a new Java project there. So now today it's week 7. So you will create a new project there, Java projects, and then CSE114 week 07 lab 1. Okay, that's the name of the projects. Do that. Let me just make sure I'm recording it. Yes. Okay, that's a project. And as we discussed, we're actually going to need 3 classes for this project. So we need student registration system, we need student record, and we also need course. Let's do that. Let's do them first. So you're going to say new class. You can say students registration system, 1 class, without the main method. You only put main method for the tester. Okay, so student registration system. Okay, we'll handle this class the last. Okay, I'm going to do that the last, not yet. So you have a class called student registration system here. Let's do another class. So right click, say new class, and here we'll do student record. You can say student record, you can say student, doesn't matter. So you can say, I'll say student record in this case. Okay, and then another class, which is going to be course. So now you can see under the default package here, we got course, we got student record, we got student registration system. We got 3 classes here. Why don't we do course first? Okay, so under course, so now for each attributes, you have to figure out what their types should be, right? So now, let's say the first attribute should be the name of the course. Very good, thank you. String name, very good. For example, it can be CSE114, Computer Science 1. That'll be the name of the course. Okay, the next one would be the number of credits, integer. Why wouldn't you put it as a double?
Just can have 2.1.
Yeah, so what do you actually have a credit like 2.5? If you don't, then 1, 2, 3 should be fine, right? You might have a credit 1, 3, or 6, or something like that. Okay, so very good. So now you can say integer number of credits. Very good. Okay, next one. If it is mandatory or elective. So now there are 2 versions we can do. You can actually say, for example, the first version you can say the nature of the course. For example, I'm just making up the name. So here you can say it can either be mandatory or optional. That's one way to do it. However, I think a better way would be the following. I'll show you both ways. A better way would be we can say Boolean is mandatory. So that means if this attribute value is actually true, that means the course is simply mandatory. If it is false, that means it is not mandatory. So that's optional. So there are only 2 possibilities. So in some way, line number 5 is a little bit unnecessary because here, if you say the nature is simply a string, it can certainly allow other values to be assigned as well. It can be mandatory, it can be optional, it can be CSE114, it can be student career, it can be anything, right? But now the only values we would like to know is true or false, right? So I'm going to comment that out, and you have to convince yourself that the second way is slightly better. Okay, it's mandatory there. And then we have final grade that the student got. Okay? Double. So now actually here it's another interesting point.
Wait, final grade doesn't A, B, C, D, or...
Yeah, that's something we're going to decide actually. Because in some school they actually got simply the numerical grade. In some school they actually got the letter grade. What happens in student career? This should be a letter grade, right? Yeah, like an A minus.
Right.
So now one question for you. Can I simply declare this grade to be a character?
If this is A, B, C, if there's no minus or plus.
But is there a minus in the grade? It's possible, right?
Yeah. So it can.
Yeah, so in this case, it's certainly possible for you to get A minus, in which case you cannot store A minus as a single character. That's why you can only use a string to store that, right? So you should really understand what's sort of the reasoning behind. Okay, now I'm gonna say, so string, and then I'm gonna say, I'll just say letter grade, just to be a little bit more complete. So it can be, for example, A minus, because I don't believe you can get A plus in SUNY Korea. Maybe not. A might be the highest one you can get. That's my understanding. Anyway, you might get other things as well. Okay, etc. Okay, so now these are the attributes we actually learn. We actually think that should be declared to reflect the problem statement we read on the paper. So now another question for you. We have so far defined a template called course, and now how do we create a template? Somehow we had to use a new keyword to say we want to create a new instance of the course. But now, how about constructor? What kind of input parameters should we put in the constructor? So now, first of all, if you want to define a constructor, first of all, its name must be the same as a class. That's something we know. So first of all, you can say course. And now, what input parameters you put inside the course constructor is really up to you. It's really up to what information do you want to get when you first create a course. It might be that when you first create a course object, you only want to specify its name. And then for other information there, you can specify them later. Okay, I'm going to show you this possibility first. It's going to make things slightly easier in the beginning. So we can say, so here you're going to say string, and then you're going to say course name. I'm going to say CNAME, just something that doesn't clash with the name attributes. Course name, and then I'm sure you know how to complete this, right? How do you complete that implementation there? Somehow you want to assign whatever course name I creates to the value, the attribute value for course. How do you?
Init name equals C.
Oh, we don't have init name here. We only have CNAME.
C name equals name.
You're saying CNAME equal name, but is that really right? So here you say, yeah. So you should really know what's the difference. So this one's totally wrong, I'm afraid, right? Because in this way, you're trying to say, I'm going to change the name of the input to attribute value. That's not, yeah. It should be the opposite. Okay? Okay, you should say this is wrong. And then what you should say instead would be name is equal to CNAME. That's what I should say. We can already test our Java program. Let's test it. How can we do that? So let's go back to our package, default package there. Right click. Let's just create a new tester. So go to class, and then I can say just registration system tester. We're gonna test all the objects there. Registration system tester. Okay. And then in this case, we're going to have a main method. Okay. Every time when we want to test, we want to have a main method. Okay. So now let's see what we can do. So now, first of all, create a course that's called CSE114. I hope you can do that. Right? Yeah, try not to look at the screen and try to do this line yourself. How do you initialize an object of type course? And then the initial name should be CSE114, Computer Science 1, let's say. Okay, so that's what you can have, for example. You can see that. Again, as I explained in the class today, we actually have an assignment here. So this part here is called the source of the assignment. And this part here is called the target of the assignments. So now in the source, we're trying to create a new object of type course, where the attribute value for the name of the course is going to be CSE114, Computer Science 1. And then once we create this object here, this variable name is going to point to that object in the memory, like what I draw on the board today, right? And then we also declare to say this variable here is of type course. Okay, that's how you should understand this line here. Good? Good. Let's just do another one. Can you create just another one? Let's say this might be, let's say just do another course. Let's say CSE114, computer science 2. I'll let you do it. Okay? I'm sure you can do it. But just make sure you try not to copy and paste. Just try to make sure you can write the syntax yourself. Because I might ask you to do that in the quiz on Friday, right? So you better practice now. Okay, I'm sure you can do that. So now, how do you actually write a line to print out the name of the course from the objects? So now what we can do is we can say system.out.println. Yes, actually, you know what? If you simply say CSE114, that is not enough. If you simply say that, you're trying to somehow print out the variable, not really the object that's pointed by the variable.
Oh, that's should be that course.CSE.
No, it should be CSE114 dot something, right? So every time when you're trying to get something from the object, you should use a dot notation. So here, CSE114 is actually an object. So if I would like to print out the title of the course, I'll say CSE114 dot. You can see over there, I actually got different attribute and methods here. The one I want to choose will be the name. So CSE114.name. That's how I print out the name of the course, right? So if you try to run the program here, so let me just do it the first time. So right click, and then you say run as Java application. So it would say CSE114 Computer Science 1. Let's do one more practice here. Remember I showed you how to use the breakpoints in debugger before. Now you can use a similar tool to actually see what's sort of the contents of the objects. Let me just let's put a breakpoint over here. Double click on the blue panel here. You see there's a blue bar besides the line numbers there. So put a breakpoint right beside the course CSE114 is equal to new course. Put a breakpoint there, and then you're going to say run. You will say debug as Java application. If you do that, it's going to stop at that point, right? If you do that, okay, just allow. And now you can see that the breakpoint was actually put here. So now we are at a point right before we actually create the objects, right before that. Okay, that's just similar to what you did before. So now let's see. So now under variables, you can see you don't have a variable called CSE114 simply because we haven't created that variable yet. That's why it's not there. But if you say step over, it's going to be there. So now simply just do step over. And now you will see this. There's something called CSE114 there, right? And if you expand that arrow there, you will see there are so many attributes there. You can see all the attributes we define for the course class is there. We have is mandatory, simply false, because we haven't set up any specific value to the Boolean variable. By default, it's false. And for the letter grade, it's simply null, because we haven't initialized the letter grade yet. So that's why it's null. And for the name here, since we did initialize that to be CSE114 Computer Science 1, so that has the value there. The number of credits, similarly, we haven't initialized that yet, so that's why it's 0. Good? Good. So that's something you also are supposed to know, how to look at the objects yourself. And one more thing to show you. So if you go to the expressions panel here, and if you don't have expressions here, you can simply go to Window, Show View, and then go to Expressions. If you click on that, and what you can do, let me just delete those first. Okay. Let me just delete the old expression there. So I would like you to add a new expression there. You can do CSE114 dot name. If you do that, you can see that expression there, CSE114.name, is going to give you that string value, right? The reason for this is CSE114 is actually a variable of type course, and we have simply just initialized its name to be CSE114 Computer Science 1. That's why you have this return value here. Yeah, try to play with that when you go home. You got much more time to play with that later on. Okay, that's about it. So far, you can go back to the Java perspective. Go back to Java here. And let's move on. So now in the course class, we actually got the name, number of credits is mandatory, letter grade. So you can see that in the constructor, we only initialize the value for the name of the course. That's the only thing we do. So that means the letter grade, somehow we have to set it up later on at some point. So let's do a method for that. So how do we do that? So we can do, so that's sort of, again, that's back to what I said today in the lecture. There are two kinds of methods. So so the special method is a constructor, but other than that, we have two kinds of methods. So we have accessors and mutators. What's the difference between accessors and mutators from your understanding of today? Try. Don't be afraid to be wrong. That's fine. What's sort of the difference between accessors and mutators? No? Would you like to give it a try?
Accessor accesses and mutator mutates.
Yeah. So what does it mean to mutate?
Change.
You change something, right? And access means you somehow just get access to it without changing it, right? So there are two kinds of methods we have here. So accessors are the methods where you're not trying to change the attribute values. Mutators are the methods where you do want to change the value of the attributes. Okay, please review the slides. Make sure you get them. Okay, so now we're going to define a mutator here. So we can say mutator change. So we would like to change the letter grade, for example, for the student. Let's say whenever they got a final grade, we're going to set it to be something. So, and one thing that's really important about mutator is it does not return anything. So that's why it has always void. And then let's say we can say set grade. Okay. Now, should we take any input parameter? Should we? You think no? But how are you supposed to know what kind of grade we're going to assign to the students?
Here, when you declare that thing, the main method.
Actually, somehow you see if this course belongs to a student, and somehow, let's say once the final exam is over, we would like to set the student's grade to be either A minus, maybe because each one of you is going to have maybe most likely a different grade for the course. Maybe someone will get A minus, someone might get B, someone might get B minus, etc. Right? So when we want to set a grade for a particular course of the students, then we have to tell the method what kind of grade we're going to set for the students, right? That particular students. So that's why we need an input parameter here. So we're going to say, so here we're going to better have the same type as the letter grade here. So we can say string final grade, for example. Okay, so now how do we define this method here? Once we get a grade, we would like to set up for this course here.
Letter grade equals final grade.
Very good. Yeah, kind of similar pattern, right? You always put the attribute on the left-hand side of the assignment. Letter grade is equal to final grade. Okay, let's do some tests immediately. If you go back to the registration system tester, okay, let me just change the name slightly differently. You can say CSE114 for gym. Let's say that's a course for gym. Okay, that's and then you can say CSE114 for gym. That means that's a specific record for Jim for CSE114. And now you're gonna say Jim somehow he got C+ for this course. So how do you do that? So you see CSE114 for Jim dot, you would say set grade. So now I say Jim will actually get C+ for the course. So you will simply do C+. So now I would like you to draw your attention here. So now this justifies why we actually need an input parameter for the set grade method in the course class. Because you can see whenever we try to set a grade for a particular person's course, we have to tell the method which grade we're going to set it to, right? That's why this C+ is actually useful for, right? So this C+ here is essentially, so again, this C+ here is called the argument value, right? And then if you go to the course class, you can see here for the set grade, this is called the signature of the method. So one is where you define that, and one is where you try to use it. So there are two different places. So in this case, we say whenever we pass some string there, it's going to be the final grade we want to set it to. So in this case, we actually set the grade to be C+. Okay, but later on, let's say there's a course for Alan, there's a course for Simon, we can set a grade to be different letter grades. Okay, and let's just use the debugger again. Let me just run to the debugger and I'll come to you. Let's just run the debugger again. If you say run debug as Java application, so the breakpoint should still be there, right? So there was a breakpoint here. If you do that, debug as Java application, you'll see that, okay, again, we stop over here right before we create CSE114 for Jim, right before that. So now let's step over, and you will see that under variables, you can see now the letter grade is currently null. That's simply just after you initialize the objects, and right before we set the grade of Jim to be C+. So it's in between. That's why now the grade will simply be null. It's not C+ yet. However, if we move from here to here, then we're actually going to see that it has been changed to C+. Okay, let's see if that's really the case. So after we print out some line in the terminal, okay, first of all, you can see there's some output there in the terminal, right? That's sort of this print line here. And now we are right before the points that we're trying to set the course grade to be C+. Okay, so watch what's going to happen. You're going to watch closely to see how the value of this letter grade here, which is highlighted here, currently it is null. And if I say step over, it says C+, right? So that's something you should really observe. Whenever you try to call a method here, use the dot notation here, I'm saying I want to set the grade for this particular course objects, and I would like to set C+ for that course's grade. Okay? Yes, so did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, it's not working. I don't know why. What's this? I get this thing.
Maybe I'll go. I'll spend some time with you maybe later. Okay, that's what we have. So let's move on. Okay, let's stop the debugger here, and then let's go back to Java. Okay, so we have set grade, and also we have course, right? Also, let's please define another method called is mandatory. Set is mandatory. How do we actually do that? Because sometimes you might want to set a course to be mandatory. For example, CSE114 is mandatory. But other courses may not be mandatory, it might be optional, right? So how do we do that? So we have another mutator here. So let's say change the nature of the course. So you can, again, we have a mutator here, so you're always going to have void. You can say set, let's say, there are actually different ways of doing this. Okay, let me show you maybe the easy way. Okay, you can say set mandatory Okay, in this case, we don't take any input parameters. And then, in this case, if we set it to be mandatory, you're going to assign. So it's mandatory. It's assigned to be true. Right? That means it is mandatory. And you can kind of imagine, I should have another method called set optional. If I do that, and I can say set optional. And now, how do you think I should change the definition for this method?
False.
False, right? Because it is not mandatory. This might be the easiest way you can do. Okay, once you have done this, if you go back to the tester here, remember initially this is mandatory is actually simply false because that's the default value. But now we would like to make CSE114 for gym to be a mandatory course. How do we do that? And in this case, let's say right after the course has been initialized. So you can say now CSE114 for gym dot set mandatory. So again, you can see why in this particular case, why do we not need a input parameter for set mandatory? Because the method itself already tells you you're going to set the course to be mandatory, right? So you don't need to pass any extra information.
If you put it's not mandatory anymore.
Sorry, say that again.
So if you write that code down, it won't be mandatory anymore.
It will be mandatory from then on. Actually.
So if you don't type that,
then it will be optional.
Yeah.
Okay. To convince you, let's say, again, let's run the debugger. Okay. If you go for run debug as Java application, and now let's see again. So again, we are right before the point we try to create the objects of CSE114 for gym. And then if you do that, this is right after gym, the CSE114 has been created. And now if you see the value for is mandatory, currently it is false. That's a default value because in your constructor, you have not initialized its value to be anything. It's simply false. But now, after line number 6 over there, so now we are right before executing line number 6. In line number 6 there, we're going to set the mandatory for the course, which is going to set this Boolean variable here to be true. So you're going to watch the difference here, going to watch the change here. In this line here that's highlighted here, it's going to change from false to true before and after the method call. Okay, so now if you say step over, you can see now this value here has just changed from false to true. Right? That's actually how the set mandatory method works. I hope that answers your question. Yes. Good. So let's go back to Java here. Okay, so we have set mandatory and we have set optional. That's pretty much what we need. Okay, that's about the course class I would like to talk about. So let's move on to another class, which is the student or student record class. And let's see how we can do. Okay, we have created the class already. So move on to student record class. Currently, it's still empty. But we're going to add some attributes to it. Okay, we're going to repeat a similar exercise. So Harman, tell me, what kind of attributes do I need? Give me.
Student ID.
Okay, do you think that should be a string, integer, or? In your case, does your student ID contain any just numerical digits, or okay? In that case, you can choose either to be a string or integer. Doesn't matter. Okay. But let's say it's a string. Okay, so just to be more flexible. So for example, string, and then student ID. Of course, let's say if your student ID is something like, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Okay. However, if your student ID is something like this, let's say if your student ID is something like this, which contains something that is not a number, then certainly you cannot say that's an integer, right? So that's the decision you have to make. Okay.
You can add. you set it as a string, you can add them, right?
But in some way, why would you like to add up student ID, right? That's yeah. Of course you can, but you wouldn't want to do that. Okay, another one. Okay, a new attribute here. So we got student ID. What about first name and last name? So they should be strings, right? That should be quite obvious. So let's say string first name and string last name. So I hope now to actually convert from attributes into the declaration in Java should be quite straightforward for you, right? So you just got to decide what types you should get. So first name, last name, program of study. For example, it can be computer science, it can be business, it can be English literature, whatever, right? Let's say a string. So string is really the most common, the most general type you can have. It can be anything. So let's say string, you can say program of study. And what about year of study? Like, are you in the first year, second year, third year, or fourth year? Integer, right? Yeah, good. So you can have integer year of study. So here you should really say between 1 and 4, just to give yourself some reminder. So if you get anything that's actually outside this range, you should give some error. Okay, but we'll talk about it later, not now. Okay, year of study, year of entrance. It can be 2015, it can be 2014, or it can be, yeah. Again, we can. It doesn't have to be a double, right? You wouldn't say 2014.5, right? You would say 2014. So let's say again integer. So year of entrance. Okay, year of entrance. Graduating year. It can be 2050. Maybe not that long. Maybe it can be 2019 for you, right? No? 2021? 21. Okay, something like that. Yeah. It can be just an integer, right? Integer year of graduation. That's expected. Of course, you might delay that, or actually, yeah, you can delay that or actually make it earlier, but it doesn't matter.
GPA.
Yeah, GPA, very good. Oh, what about the list of courses? Actually, with GPA in this case, let's make GPA rather than an attribute. Let's make it a method. Okay, I'm going to show you why.
Can you just like do return? Calculate GPA.
Somehow you want to calculate based on the grades, yeah? So now, let's focus on this. So now, let's say you have the list of registered courses. In this case, how do you think should be the type of the attributes? So now that's the tricky part. This might be the trickiest part, the most difficult part for this exercise here. Now, I would like to declare an attribute. Let's say simply just call it registered courses. But now, I would need a type for the attributes. If I simply say course, that would compile, but that's not so correct, because when you say course, that means it's a single variable holding a single course, but you might have 2 courses that's registered, or you might have 3, you might have 4. So what should we use here? So what does that suggest to you? You might have more than 1 courses that you have to store in the students. So what should we do here? Any idea? That's something you have learned? How do we store more? For example, let's say before, how do you store a Fibonacci sequence? Because in the Fibonacci sequence, you got more than 1 numbers there, right? But now, in the list of registered courses, you also got more than 1 courses there. It's a similar situation. Yeah, exactly, array. Yeah, exactly, array. And how do we do an array of courses? We will simply do square brackets, like that. Fantastic. That's exactly how you do it, right? So that's how we do it. We say we have an attribute called register courses, and its type is simply an array of courses, which means each element in the array is a course. Okay. I'm also going to talk about how the diagram looks like on Friday. but this is how you do programmatically in Java. Okay. I'm going to show you later how you can manipulate that later as well. Okay, so now that's what we have got so far. So now, after all the attributes, we're going to think about constructor. Okay, do we have the time? 4:25. Good. Okay, so now for constructor, first of all, you must have the name of the constructor the same as the class, student record. Okay. What input parameters would you like to have? There's no right and wrong answer, really. Whatever you do not initialize in the constructor, you have to somehow set them up later. Okay. For example, if you go back to our tester here, you see, in this case here, when we initialize a course, we only initialize the name of the course, but not the letter grade. That's why later on we have to also set up the letter grade explicitly. That's what we chose to do. But now, for the course, for the student record, you got to decide what you want to give to the student record initially. What's sort of the most important information that you must get for the students in this case? It's really up to you, really. You have to choose. There's no right and wrong. You don't have to follow my answer, so just tell me how you think. So, what information do you want to use to initialize the student record? Yeah. You at the back. Yes, please tell me. We have so many attributes here. You want to initialize them all, or you just want to initialize the most important ones? If so, what are they? So choose one, or choose some. You don't have to, there's no right and wrong answer. Huh? Student ID? Anything else? The student ID? What do you think are the most important information here that you want to initialize already? Okay, that's good. So you certainly want a student ID. So string, so let's say new student ID. And what else? You said year of. Very good. So it has to be the same type. So I'll just say year of entrance. Anything else?
Name, first name, last name.
First name, last name. Yeah, you can do that as well. Okay, what about we do also first name, last name? But that's something totally up to you as a programmer. Okay, there's no right and wrong answer. Okay, the principle is whatever you haven't initialized in the constructor, you have to do that explicitly later. That's the rule. Okay, first name and last name. So what about I do the following? First, student ID, and then I would say string. So now you have 4 parameters basically. String, I would say new first name, comma, string, new last name. So we have 4 parameters here. So we have a constructor here called student record, the same name as the class, and then we have 4 parameters. So we have new student ID, new first name, new last name, and the year of entrance for the student. That means whenever you want to create a new instance for the student record objects, you have to give these 4 information here. That's a must. Other information, you gotta pass them later. Okay. Let's just finish the definition for this method here. And here, I'm sure you know how to set up the attributes accordingly, right? For example, since you're given the new student ID, you should use that to set up your student ID. So you would say student ID is equal to new student ID. If you use a control space in Eclipse, it also helps you to select the words to complete. Also, you have first name is equal to new first name. You have last name is equal to new last name. And also you have your year of entrance. So year of entrance is equal to new. So actually the year of entrance, like that. So you see you have 4 parameters values. You are trying to use them to set up the 4 attributes accordingly. So what have we left off, actually? You see, we have in the constructor, we'll set up the student ID, we'll set up the first name, last name, and also the year of entrance. So you can actually somehow feel free to move that to here. So that means these are the things that you actually have to initialize them explicitly later. Okay. Are we good? Good. Let's see how we can continue. For example, let's say, let's just do some tester first. So let's always good to do a test. Let's do the following. Let's say we do a student record for Jim, for example. For Jim, is equal to new student record here. You can see now you actually got, if you got a code completion facility from Eclipse, it's going to show you have to pass these 4 argument value for these 4 parameters, right? So now for new student ID, so let's say we have an ID for Jim, just anything. It can be, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just something, just want to show you. And Jim's first name, let's say Jim. Last name, Davis. And the year of entrance, let's say 2015. Okay, if you do that, and make sure to put a semicolon at the end. Are we good? About this construction here. So you're creating a new student record here, and you're trying to pass 4 argument values for that. The first argument value here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this corresponds to the, if you go to the student record class, you will see that this corresponds to the string new student ID. That's the first parameter, right? If you go back to that, go back there, and Jim here would correspond to the new first name here, right? And Davis will be the new last name, and then 2015 will be the year of entrance. And that will actually set up the attributes accordingly. Okay, so now let's move on. You can certainly do another one. Let's just do another student. Student record, what about Jonathan? Is equal to new students, student record, like that. And now let's first give a student number. So let's say 1357900. Doesn't matter. So let's say Jonathan Cooper. And let's say he entered, let's say slightly earlier, let's say 2015. Okay. Okay, let's see what error do I have here. Yeah, there was a typo there, so just make sure you don't put any typo. Okay, so now let's do another breakpoint to actually illustrate to you how the objects might have same attributes but different attribute values. Let's see. So now again, could you please just delete this breakpoint here? And the way to delete that is simply double click on that. Then it'll be gone. Okay, could you please put a breakpoint at this line here, the line right beside the new student, the student record here, right? You know what? To avoid confusion, what about just put it here? Right after Jim set letter grade. So line number 8 over there. Let's put it there. Okay. Now, if you say run debug as Java application, now we are stopping at here. It's right before we create Jin and Jonathan. So that's why under variables, you don't have Jin and Jonathan, right? So now let's step over. If we step over, the breakpoint is now stopping here, the one that's highlighted here, right? So now it's right before we create Jin, right before that. If you step over, you're going to see Jin over here, right? If you step, so now we are right before we create Jonathan. If you step over again, you're going to see Jonathan as well. Okay, So now here comes the critical points. Let me just maximize the variables here. So now if you expand the Jim and expand Jonathan, let's see. So again, that's again and again, that's a really important point to emphasize. So you can see for both Jim and Jonathan, both of them have first name, last name, program of study, registered courses, and etc. So they all have these attributes as we defined in the student record class. However, you can see the value for the attributes are different because they are different persons, they are different records. So now you can see for the first name here we got Jim, for the first name here we got Jonathan, and here we got Davis, over there we got Cooper, and here we got some student ID here, and here we got another student ID here. So they are different values, right? So that's called the instance-specific values. Okay? Something I'll also mention again on Friday. Okay, we are done. So stop the debugger, go back to Java. Okay, so now let's, what's the time? 36. Okay, we still have about 10 minutes. Okay, let's see what we can do. Let's just do a little bit more methods here. So now let's say a student may register for new course, change their program of study, delay their year of graduate. Let's do a simple one first. What if, let's say a student would like to change their major. They would like to change their program of study from computer science into other subjects. What about that? How do we do that? So if you go to student record here, so here you can see the program of study is not part of the initialization process. So initially that will simply be null, which means it has not been initialized yet. So we need a method there. You can say we need a mutator here. Again, you should really review the difference between mutator and accessor. So again, we need a mutator here. So you're going to say void, always for mutator. You would say set program of study. Now, should we pass some input parameter here? Should we or should we not? Because somehow you have to indicate to see which program of study you want to change that into. It might be the new program of study is actually computer science, or it might be the new program of study is physics or chemistry, right? So in this case, you do need an input parameter, actually, right? So you would say string new program of study. Okay, that's something you can do. Okay, how should we do the assignment here? So we would say the program of study, which is the attributes, is going to be assigned to this input parameter here. Just going to copy that and put it there. Okay, how do we test that? If you go back to your registration systems tester here, and now let's say after Jim has been created, we're going to say Jim dot change. Okay, so we're going to say Jim dot set program of study, right? If you do that, you are supposed to pass an argument value for the new program of study. So let's say, so now because this is the first time we actually try to set the Jim's program. So let's say initially he studied computer science. Okay, now let's say soon after that he decides to change his major to something else. What about applied linguistics? Something very different. Okay, so now you can see these two interesting lines. We are trying to call the same method here, set program of study. Trying to call the same method twice, and we're trying to call this method here on the same objects. That means we're going to change the program of study attribute value of this object here, first of all to computer science, and then from computer science to applied linguistics. That's what the two lines are going to do. Now, how do we see that in the debugger? Let's have a look. If we try to run that, And let's put a breakpoint here. So delete that one. Let's put right besides. We try to set the program of study for Jim. Okay, right besides that. If you try run debug as Java application, you will have, okay, so now let me go to debug. I would just need to see the variable here. Somehow it has been, okay, variables here. Okay, so now you can see for Jim, okay, for Jim, the program of study currently, so let me just see where we get stopped. Okay, so first of all, we are currently here. So this is right after Jim has been created, but right before Jim's program has been set. That is why the program of study here will be null, which means it has not been set yet. What's going to happen if I say step over from 11 to 12?
To change from computer science to like applied linguistics.
No, not the case. I'm saying from 11 to 12.
Oh.
Line 12 is going to be right before.
Oh, they just show computer science from now.
From now to computer science,
Yeah.
right? Not from computer science to applied linguistics. Because now, when the breakpoint stops over here, that means it's right before we execute this line, and right after we execute the previous line. And right after the previous line, we just initialize Jim's various attributes, but not the program of study. That's why it's null. Okay, let's try that. And if we do the following, if we do step over 11 to 12, you will see that program of study has now become computer science from now. If I say step over again, what's going to happen? It's going to change from computer science into applied linguistics, right? If I do it again, it's going to be the case. Okay, you see that's applied linguistics. Okay. So now, I think it might be a good point to stop here. So please review all the small points I've discussed. I'm going to post the video today. You can either look at your code or look at the video. And then this may be covered in Friday's quiz. This may be. So that's why you really have to study. Okay? Okay, so if you have no questions, you're dismissed. No, don't worry about it for today. That's fine.